Neo Geo World! 救出せよ破壊せよ Go! 46メガ The future is now SNK.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Player One Start. Today we are continuing our series on the Neo Geo line of systems. And in this video, we are actually going to take a look at the development of two lines of hardware that SNK would release in the Neo Geo family. First, they released the MVS, or Mutli-Video System. This was going to be Neo Geo's answer to standardizing arcade hardware. Before this, most video game systems in the arcade were built around the games they were supposed to be releasing on that hardware. In other words, if you wanted a game that could do 3D, you had to build a different set of hardware to handle the 3D. If you wanted to build a shooter, if you wanted to build a racing game, there were all different hardware that you had to build. But Neo Geo wanted to save cost by making all of the common components available and just swapping out the necessary pieces of hardware to make each game different. So that's where the Mutli-Video System comes in, and that was really revolutionary for the arcade, at least in the late 1980s. Let's go ahead and take a look. The Neo Geo hardware was an evolution of an older SNK/Alpha Denshi M68000 arcade platform that was used in Time Soldiers in 1987. This arcade hardware was further developed in Prisoners of War in 1988 using a similar structure but slightly improved. Unlike other popular arcade hardware of the time, this unit used sprite strips instead of the more common tiled map-based backgrounds. This gave the game developers a lot more control over what was displayed on the screen and how much you can have moving at one time. For example, many games could take advantage of parallax scrolling in ways that other arcade platforms could not. Integral to development of the Neo Geo hardware was Eiji Fukatsu, who oversaw development of new features such as adding sprite scaling through the use of scaling tables stored in ROM, as well as support for much higher amounts of data on cartridges and better sound hardware. Another key developer of this hardware was Takashi Nishiyama, who came over to SNK after developing a game called Street Fighter for Capcom in 1987. It was Nishiyama who proposed the concept of an arcade system that uses ROM cartridges like a game console, which would save SNK a lot of money in production costs, which would help make the system cheaper for markets such as China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and in areas where it was difficult to sell dedicated arcade hardware because of game piracy. He would also propose a home version of the arcade hardware to further drive down costs. Nishiyama would also be involved in some of the biggest games on the platform, creating the Fatal Fury game franchise as a spiritual successor to the original Street Fighter. He would also work on other franchises on the Neo Geo, such as The Art of Fighting, The King of Fighters, as well as the run-and-gun shooter series, Metal Slug. The Neo Geo hardware would be officially announced on January 31st, 1990 in Osaka, Japan, and upon the release of the arcade cabinet, it was well received by arcade operators. The main benefit of having an MVS cabinet was the fact that they were able to save on some much-needed space by having a single cabinet for multiple games. The MVS would come in 2, 4, and 6 slot systems that would allow gamers to pick which games they wanted at the title screen. The Neo Geo arcade cabinets used the same 4-button and joystick combination that the home cabinet would have, only these would be mounted into the arcade cabinet case. The cartridges used in the MVS system would look and operate a little bit different than the home version to keep arcade operators from trying to buy the cheaper AES cartridges. Unlike their home version counterparts, the cartridges for the MVS would not contain beautiful artwork or fancy labels, as they were not designed to be viewed being hidden inside of the arcade cabinet. In Japan, SNK used the Candy Cab layout, which allow the machines to be smaller, lighter, and way less than their American counterparts. This style of cabinet is normally lined in long uniform rows, allowing for each person to have their own screen and controls. Playing against each other is achieved by networking cabinets together. In North America, Neo Geo games were normally housed in red stand-up cabinets, branded with the Neo Geo logo. Because the cabinet could house multiple games but only run one at a time, usually there was not specialized artwork on the side of each cabinet, but in the marquee there were removable flyers that would show which games were available on this machine. The cabinets in North America would also support headphones and a memory card, something that made the MVS unique, as you could save your games between the arcade and take it home and play it on the AES version. These cabinets would have two 4-button controls as well as two joysticks for player 1 and player 2, and the buttons on all of these arcade cabinets would follow a standardized color scheme, where A was always red, B was yellow, C was green, and D was blue. This is also how any in-game graphics would show the control panel when displaying how to play a game. Today, you do not have to buy a Neo Geo in its whole arcade cabinet form. Many tech hobbyists have made them into what's known as a consoleized version, which allows you to hook it up to standard home equipment such as other game console controllers and a consumer-based CRT. Some have also offered this as a service, offering their own version of the MVS, such as this example, the Omega Entertainment System. Although it is designed to look like an AES, this system only natively accepts MVS cartridges. Again, creating a hardware system that had interchangeable cartridges was kind of a revolutionary idea for the arcades, but SNK really wants to revolutionize the home industry and make it that much closer to providing an arcade experience at home by letting you have the arcade hardware at home. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Advanced Entertainment System. The Neo Geo AES, or Advanced Entertainment System, was released in Japan on April 26, 1990. At first, the AES home system was only available for rent at commercial establishments, such as hotel chains, bars, and restaurants. However, when SNK realized that some gamers were willing to buy a $650 game console, SNK expanded sales and marketing into the home console market in 1991. Unlike the purely functional design of the MVS hardware, the Neo Geo AES was designed in a slim, black-shelled console imprinted with gold and white letters. The game cartridges themselves would also receive an aesthetic upgrade, having the same glossy black plastic on their shells, along with providing some beautiful artwork to be able to tell games apart from each other. Unlike MVS cartridges, which came usually in just plastic sleeves or cardboard boxes, AES cartridges would come in soft plastic shells or in printed cardboard boxes. Instead of including battery-backed saved options in each cartridge, Neo Geo opted to provide a memory card, which is the first home system to do so. The reasoning behind adding this card is the fact that you could actually start a game in the arcade, save your progress, and continue it at home, and vice versa. Because the Neo Geo's hardware is standardized across both systems, this provides the same exact graphics and sound as you would see in the arcade, which provided players with a highly superior gaming experience when compared to other home game consoles, arcades, and even computers of the time. The Neo Geo AES officially launched in the United States on July 1st, 1991, with a debut price of $649.99, but it would include 2 joystick controllers and a game, either Baseball Stars Professional or NOM 1975. And although you may think that that's just a bit higher than game consoles being launched today with the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, the equivalent of $649 in 1991 is $1,235 as of 2020. The game console will be later bundled with Magician Lord and Fatal Fury, but those were all sold as the Gold System. Eventually, there would be a Silver System package that would launch at $399, include 1 joystick controller, and no pack-in game. Other games were also available at launch at about $200 a pop and up, which was over double to quadruple the price of the competition. However, SNK knew that they would only be selling this system in games to a small market. But thanks to its full compatibility between the arcade system and the home system, Little to no money was being spent on porting or marketing of the AES, since the MVS success was automatically feeding the AES market, which made the console very profitable for SNK. As the Neo Geo AES was meant to be hooked up to a home TV, the controllers were not built into the console, but they were actually faithful duplicates of the arcade controls in a larger format. Due to the bulkiness of the controllers, you would have to keep them on your lap or on a counter of some sort, rather than being able to hold the controller in your hands. Also, in order to match the aesthetic of the home console, the colored buttons are gone in favor of a plain gray design, but each one of them are clearly marked with which one they represent. I appreciate that these are not labeled directly on the buttons because it would have worn off by now. Just judging by where people's palms were resting on the end of this controller, you can see the Neo Geo logo is clearly being worn off. This is not the only controller you could use with the Neo Geo system, however, as you can see with this custom controller that I got from a person online. These controllers are actually more consistent with a Sega 6-button controller and the controllers they would use on the Neo Geo CD unit, which, although not a major part of this review, I should mention it as a line in this family of systems as well. The Neo Geo CD system was released on September 9th of 1994 in Japan and didn't make its way over to the United States until January 15th of 1996. In terms of the hardware driving this system, it is set up almost exactly the same as the AES and the MVS units, with the big difference being that it has a CD-ROM drive instead of a cartridge slot, which would allow SNK to charge cheaper prices with the cheaper format of compact discs. In this line of systems, there were 3 different variations produced, the first being a front-loading version that had the CD tray that would pop out and was only distributed in Japan. There would be a top-loading version that was released worldwide, and there would be a 3rd edition called the Neo Geo CD-Z, which upgraded the read speed of the CD-ROM drive, allowing for faster loading times. This version is the one most coveted by collectors today, and as such it is the most expensive variant. As the discs are region-free, you can take advantage of this system if you get the right power adapter and a display that can work with it. When looking at the entire Neo Geo family of systems, there are about 158 officially licensed games released, with most of them being available for the Mutli-Video System, and the selection decreases as you go to the other 2 platforms. All in all, it is this entire line of systems that represents the Neo Geo completely. All of these systems share the same basic hardware and play almost exactly the same games in the same way. The main difference between all these units are where they were intended to be used and the media you use with them. There's actually no other hardware line of systems that could match what the Neo Geo did in the early 1990s, as all other manufacturers use separate hardware in the arcades than they did at home. However, other game consoles, such as the Nintendo 64 and the Sega Dreamcast, would share some hardware components between their arcade systems and home version counterparts to make game porting a bit easier. But neither one of those systems could play the same games natively. There was some sort of porting process that would have to take place to get the game to run between their arcade and home hardware. So hopefully this makes the Neo Geo line of systems make a little bit more sense to those of you out there that may not be as familiar with this hardware. In the next part in this series, we're going to take an in-depth look at the tech specs of the Neo Geo line of systems, and how they were able to provide superior graphics and sound to every other home console of the time. But for now, that's actually going to wrap things up for this video. If you like this video and you'd like to help out with future projects on this channel, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Also, if you enjoy the content of this channel, please remember to click on this subscribe button. Again, I want to thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.